what are some of the greatest challenges that you face and that you have faced recently? What are you willing to share with us?
Sure. Well, I mean, I think that everybody that comes here to the center they come because they have a servant's heart. They want to serve. They may or may not have experienced an abortion themselves. And oftentimes I find that to be true, that men and women that are drawn to the center to serve, it's because they experienced an abortion and there's some regret in that, or there's some desire to help other people that had to struggle in this way. And so when individuals come to us with this servant's heart, once they get here, sometimes they're in it for the long haul, but oftentimes, it's a tough business to be in. The legalities of it, the emotional aspect of it, you have to go into it knowing that we're not in control.
Today on the show, I have with me Kim Barton, who is the executive director of the Share Center. Kim, welcome, and thanks for spending some time with me.
Thanks so much, Jim. Glad to be here.
Hey, Kim, what is the Share Center? Why don't we just start right with that?
Sure. The Share Center, it actually stands for Sexual Health and Reproductive Education. The Share Center, we've been here now 7 years, and we provide all of our services are free and confidential. But they include medical care and educational support in hopes to reduce unplanned pregnancies. So like the medical care, we're going to provide STD testing and treatment. We're going to go out to schools and provide education to students. It'll be things like healthy relationships, STD awareness, fetal development. And then we also actually have a course for parents and grandparents called Be the Louder Voice. That's a program for families to basically, how do they navigate this highly sexualized world? How do they have appropriate conversations with their children at young ages, so that as children age, they come to us as parents rather than the society and Google and friends to find out about this information. So that's the educational component. And then we also have the medical side of things as well.
Well, that's encouraging to hear. I mean, we're definitely living in a generation today that they are shaping their philosophies of life, their theology of life, based upon the sound bites that they get from here and there. So that's exciting. You said 7 years. Kim, are you also the founder of the Share Center, or did the Share Center bring you on at some point?
Well, actually, there was another pregnancy center. I was volunteering at the time through my church, and they approached me and said that they were actually gifted with a portable sonogram machine. And they wanted to know if they could offer services in our area, because our area didn't have a center like that. And then the community just really rallied. Very shortly thereafter, the local churches and families got together and said, why don't we raise funds to have a pregnancy center here in this area? And so we became a satellite of that pregnancy center. I was brought in at the very beginning because it basically just grew so quickly that they needed a staff person here. And so eventually, after 4 years of being a satellite, we did become our own 501c3. And that's when we became the Share Center at that time. But yes, I'm not the founder, but I've been here since the beginning to see it grow.
Well, tell me a little bit. How did you become the executive director?
Sure. My background, actually, I have a master's in counseling psychology, and it was one of those things where you find something in the church bulletin that says, would you like to help pregnant women that are considering abortion or have an unplanned pregnancy? And with my counseling background, I came to my first meeting, and honestly, God just laid a path that one thing led to another until 7 years later, I'm the executive director now.
Okay. So is that what you were doing then before you became the executive director? Were you doing in your own counseling practice or working with another practice or not? What were you doing?
So actually, I had began my career in child protective services.
Oh, wow.
I moved on and I moved on into foster care. And then I did take a break to become a mother. And I really was, I'd worked in my church while I was a mother as well. But this was just one of those things. I wasn't looking for employment. I was literally volunteering at my church and just answering a call. And so my husband and I just prayed about it. And one of those things where you decide, sure, I'll come on. At the time, I was what they called the operations director. So or the center director. I oversaw this particular center here until such time, as I said, 4 years later, when the board decided that we were ready to fly out of the nest and be on our own, if you will. And so then I did become the executive director at that time.
Well, tell me a little bit about the story that led you into Child Protective Services.
Sure. Well, as a teenager, I actually had a neighbor who he was with SAPD. With the police department there in San Antonio. And I just remember one day he was talking to me. I was discerning, like, what did I want to do with my life? And always had a desire to work with children. And he just talked about all the abuse and neglect that he saw as a police officer. And, the struggles of Child Protective Services and the struggles of trying to get resources for families. And I don't know, I thought that's what I want to do. I honestly, at that time, I felt like what I want to do is become a counselor. I wanted to work to help prevent whatever I could do to help prevent abuse and neglect in children. And so Child Protective Services is just one place that I applied after I got my bachelor's in psychology. And so I started working there at Child Protective Services. And then I went on to get my master's in counseling psychology, thinking that I would become a therapist. But I actually ended up going into foster care and doing treatment plans and working with foster families. And so that's kind of where my career ended up taking me, again, working with children from abusive backgrounds. So that's been really my entire career has been working with children with special needs, children with these type of backgrounds. And so it kind of made sense when I came here, working with families before they ever have that unplanned pregnancies. Because oftentimes we do see families that have children that maybe didn't plan to have children, and now they're struggling financially, they're struggling to parent. And so here at the Pregnancy Center, we're able to offer prenatal classes, parenting classes, help them financially, so that if they do choose life for their child, which is what we ultimately hope, hopefully we can support them with the different services we have.
There must be some training that you provide for these people so that they themselves can be, on one hand, compassionate, helpful, available, but at the same time have boundaries. What would that look like if so-and-so were to come in and really try to be working through this process and be matched up with an advocate? Talk to us about that. What does that look like? What are the boundaries, and what's that process?
Sure. So our advocates, as I mentioned, they are volunteers. They're supervised by our staff, and they do have to go through a 7-week training program. So before even that, though, they're going to come into an orientation so that we can talk to them about, what our expectations are here, how we serve, so that they can decide whether they think they're a good fit for the program. And then they're going to actually fill out a whole application. There's a background check that's involved. They're going to interview with us so we can get to know them better. And then they're going to go through a 7-week program. That training program is actually provided by an organization called CareNet. It's a national organization that we're actually affiliated with them. We choose to be affiliated with them. And in so doing, we have to abide by certain standards of affiliation. They provide our ongoing training, annual conventions that we can go to. And this advocate training is one that they built. And it just talks them, because our advocates, they're not necessarily coming from a counseling background or a nursing background. They're just people that want to serve men and women in these situations. So we're going to give them the tools and the resources to be able to be prepared for that. And then once they graduate from that program, they're going to then receive on-site supervised training, where our nurses and staff will go in with them in the rooms until they're ready to be by themselves at that time. And our nurses in every counseling session, or every intake rather, where there's a pregnancy test or a sonogram involved, or STD testing, the nurse actually is in the room, and she's the one that conducts the medical portion of the session.
How long does an advocate work with a person or a couple or a family?
So that's just going to depend. I mean, if they're coming in, many of our clients are coming anywhere from 5 to 10 weeks. That's the majority of our clients of pregnancy. And so if they choose to continue coming in for those weekly classes, I mean, we'll see them through till birth. And then once the child's born, we absolutely invite them to come back for parenting classes. You know, that's one thing that society says about pregnancy centers is, or they say about people that are pro-life, if you will, is that all we care about is the child and giving birth, and we don't care about them after the fact. And that's not true. We really encourage our clients to continue to come back after they have the baby, because they can continue on with parenting classes. Our material support that we provide in our boutique goes all the way up to 3T. And if a client wanted to continue coming on for some of our classes, because we do have classes that deal with like buying a car, buying a house, managing a budget. So we have classes that go well beyond the birth of a child. So, you know, we'll encourage them to come in and provide that support if they need it.
Yeah, that's encouraging. That's great. As the executive director of the Share Center, let's get a little personal. What are some of the greatest challenges that you face and that you have faced recently? What are you willing to share with us?
Sure. Well, I mean, I think that everybody that comes here to the center, they come because they have a servant's heart. They want to serve. They may or may not have experienced an abortion themselves. And oftentimes I find that to be true, that men and women that are drawn to the center to serve, it's because they experienced an abortion, and there's some regret in that, or there's some desire to help other people that had to struggle in this way. And so when individuals come to us with this servant's heart, once they get here, sometimes they're in it for the long haul, but oftentimes, or, you know, it's a tough business to be in. The legalities of it, the emotional aspect of it, you know, you have to go into it knowing that we're not in control. You know, we'll do what we can to support that family. At the end of the day, it's their choice. And we have to, you know, we may hope that they choose life and they realize that this is a life that they carry. But we also have to understand that they're walking in their shoes, and they need to make that choice. And we're going to, like I said, offer services afterwards, like the surrendering the secret and stuff. But we're not here to judge. We are simply here to educate and let them know they're not alone. You know, when men and women who've had abortions come to us, sometimes they'll say, number one, if only I had known, you know, if only I'd known he was a child, if only I'd known that there was support, if only I'd known there were other options. And so first and foremost, we want them not to leave saying, I didn't know.
How does that happen, Kim? I mean, how does a person grow up in America and not know that there are other options, that there are help? How does that happen? What's your experience in that?
You know, time and time again, I meet people that they've never heard of a pregnancy center. Mm-hmm. No idea that pregnancy centers exist. Pregnancy centers have been around since the 70s. I mean, since abortion became legal. Right. But I myself didn't know what a pregnancy center was until I became involved with one. Okay. And so I think that people, and because abortion is so much more front and center now, and it's made to seem, I mean, if you go and do any research on it, you'll see that they say you're not alone. 1 in 4 women have an abortion in America by the time they're 45 years old. So when you go to look up about abortion information,
you said 1 in 4?
1 in 4 women by the time they're 45 will have an abortion. And so and I'm only speaking from a woman's perspective right now, but as a woman, if you are in a desperate place and you see that statistic, you think, wow, that's a lot of people. So everybody's doing it.